Welcome everybody again to another one of the VMS Family Counseling Service training that we are offering. In this case, we are going to be using and incorporating a training uh, composed by the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, called Caring for Children Who Have Experienced Trauma. So this training is actually a series of workshops that here at VMS we are going to be conducting, possibly 1 to 2 every month, and we're going to be releasing them online so you will have access to them and complete them. The total number of workshops is 8, so hopefully many of you find it one, educational and motivating to follow along and do each workshop with us as we are releasing them month to month. Again, the title of the training is called Caring for Children Who Have Experienced Trauma, specifically designed for resource parents. And we're going to be talking a lot about trauma. We're going to be talking a lot about what trauma is, what trauma does, what trauma causes, what it looks like, how we can help and support. And a lot of talk about self-care. I think here at VMS we do a lot of talk about self-care in general, but again, these workshops should give you, as a resource parent, some extra tools that you can use and some extra knowledge that you may be able to use in your day-to-day work that you do with your children. Okay, without further ado, we are going to get going. Just remember, make sure that if you need some of the documents or supportive documentation for some of the activities that we're going to be doing, please click on the link for documents and download them as well, so you can have a reference as to what you are looking at and what you are looking for. But yes, you should have everything you need in that when you download those documents. Okay. So we definitely talk about trauma a lot here at VMS, and specifically and especially because all of us, and all the parents that we work with and our clientele work with children who come from these difficult backgrounds. Difficult backgrounds means that they have experienced an unnormal upbringing that has, you know, in their lives may have even experienced trauma and are working through some of the consequences um, of daily life living because of the trauma they've experienced. So, why a trauma workshop? Well, why a trauma workshop? Well, for one, many children in foster care have lived through traumatic experiences. We talk a lot about a traumatic experience even being the removal process, when the children are being removed from their parents or whoever they were in the care of, that they had, that couldn't meet their needs and they needed to be removed from. And so, even if it's that, we talk a lot about that being one of the traumatic experiences that the children experience. Not to mention everything else that the child or children may have already experienced in their homes or with their biological family, and or whoever their caretakers were. Two, children bring their traumas with them into our home. So it's important to note that the children that we work with, trauma doesn't just stop when you remove a child from the environment. Um, what this means is that when the child is coming into your home, the child is coming with a worldview based on the experiences that they had in their home environment, wherever they were at, that they were removed from. And so it's important to note that that experience and that worldview is going to shape who they are and how they see the world. And so, as they're coming into your home, it is important to keep that in mind, because we can't expect them to see things and know things the way we know them or the way your children know them, because they haven't experienced the world the same way that you guys have. and or your children have. And so we can't have that expectation. So keep that in the back of your mind. Trauma also affects a child's behavior, feelings, relationship, and the view of the world in many profound ways. So again, this is going to be what we are going to be talking about and focused on, not only in this particular training that you are working on now, but also in future workshops and trainings. Again, this is a series of workshops and trainings that we're going to be diving into, talking about trauma and really getting into deep conversation, and hopefully building some skills and giving you guys some tools to work with as you guys are proceeding in the work that you do daily with these children. Continuing on, why a trauma workshop? So another thing to keep in mind is that the trauma that the children have experienced also affects us too. Children's trauma affects us. In what ways? Compassion fatigue. Dealing with trauma without the proper tools and understanding can lead to compassion fatigue. The feeling numb, the feeling burnt out, the feeling unable to handle one or more child's sad stories. Remember, you're investing in these children. You're investing your emotions. You're investing your time. You're investing yourself as a whole into these kids. And so that's going to wear you down. And so those are things also to kind of keep in mind. 2, painful memories. A child's trauma-related behavior can also bring back memories of your own that you may have struggled hard to forget. Could that be why you find it so much harder to take care of this child than any other you've had in your home? What about the child who tells you about terrible things that happened that now you can't stop thinking or dreaming about? Again, these painful memories can re-trigger or trigger things in yourself that you have not dealt with yet. And so it's important to be very self-aware of where you are, who you are, and what you can deal with. Be realistic with yourself. What can you deal with? What can you deal with? What are you not ready to work with? Because again, the person and the people that are going to get hurt is not only going to be you by remembering these things and being triggered by these memories or these actions or these behaviors, but the child as well. Because as a consequence, you may not be able to handle their behavior and you may not deal with it appropriately. And so these are definitely things to keep in mind as you are working, with kids, as to what can you work with, what do you know you can handle, what do you know you can't handle, and keep that in mind and be very, very truthful to yourself. And a third thing on here on how trauma affects us, secondary traumatization. Secondary traumatization is a child's response to trauma, and our responses can be so severe as to disrupt a child's placement in your home. Right? So we talk about that. And secondary trauma is actually not experiencing the trauma yourself, but by virtue of being told or observing behaviors or reading about the child's past and experiences, that in itself could trigger what we call secondary trauma. Secondary trauma is trauma experienced not directly. It's indirectly experienced, again, through reading, through being told, etc. Trauma's effects on children and on us can disrupt a placement. I think we know this very well. If we don't know this, we have seen this. Sometimes when we are working with children, there are times when behaviors can be too much. Behaviors can escalate to the point where you may ask, as a resource parent, for the child to be removed from your home and placed somewhere else. Again, how does trauma affect placement? That's exactly how trauma affects placement. Um, the child's experiences are causing certain behaviors, certain things are happening in your home that you are not okay with, and so therefore you are find yourself in the position to ask for the child's removal and for the child to be placed somewhere else. Because why? There, you are not adequately prepared to work with this child, and there's nothing wrong with that. I just want to note that there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. I think one of the things that you should keep in mind is being very truthful to yourself and who you are, and at the point where you're like, hey, I am not capable of handling the behaviors, and what I'm observing from this child, I am not the best person to help this child. I think that is important to note and important to speak up about when you find yourself in that situation. So don't take asking for a placement change as, a failure for yourself. It's not. It's actually a success in the fact that you are, voicing that you are not right now prepared and or have the tools to work with this child, and you want what's best for this child, and what's best for this child may be with somebody who already has those tools and or is adequately prepared with the services to engage this child. So keep that in mind. But yes, it happens a lot and it happens often. And just know that you please do not feel guilty that you are asking for this. But it is exactly and precisely why we mention it, that their trauma that they come with affects them to the point where they are constantly probably going to be moving often. And what does that do to them? That continues to bring on the cycle of re-traumatization. So with that, moving forward, what will we be learning? So I'm going to elaborate just a little bit on the 8 different modules, the 8 different workshops that we're going to be having in regards to this particular um, set of trainings provided by or completed by the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. Module number 1 is going to be introduction. So in this module, we'll be introducing you to the stories of several children who have experienced trauma and review the essential elements that every resource parent should know when caring for a child who has been through trauma. That's going to be module number 1. Module number 2, titled Trauma 101, will talk a bit about what trauma is and how we, as resource parents, can help children move past their traumatic past. Module number 3, Understanding Trauma's Effects. In module number 3, we will take a closer look on how trauma affects children's development and discuss the effects of trauma on children of various ages. Module number 4, Building a Safe Place. In module number 4, we're going to focus on the importance of safety. We'll discuss the difference between physical safety and psychological safety and learn techniques for helping traumatized children feel safe. Continuing to module number 5, dealing with feelings and behaviors. In module number 5, we'll delve more deeply into how trauma affects children's feelings and behaviors and learn new approaches for changing negative and destructive behaviors and reactions. Module number 6, connections and healing. Connections are important. So, module number 6 focuses on the importance of connections in the lives of traumatized children. We'll talk about ways to help children maintain the positive relationships in their lives and how to help children make meaning of their traumatic past. Module number 7, Becoming an Advocate. You are already an advocate if you are a resource parent. Module number 7 is extremely and should be extremely valuable to you. Module number 7 will discuss how resource parents can work effectively with the team of people who are involved in a child's life. We will also discuss how to recognize when a child needs professional help to heal from the effects of trauma. Finally, module number 8. I feel like module number 8 should be module number 1, or it should at least be talked about several times. But because I feel like it's the most important one, taking care of yourself. If you don't take care of yourself, you will not be able to take care of others. I cannot stress that enough. So in module number 8, it's all about you. In this module, we'll talk about how a child's trauma can affect you and about how important it is to take care of yourself. Setting some ground rules here. In your packet that you downloaded from our website, you should have access to a feelings thermometer. That actually we're going to talk about in the next slide, but I want to bring up this important thing. When we set some ground rules in terms of giving and listening to a training online, if a topic or activity makes you uncomfortable, feel free to take a timeout. Go ahead and pause the video. Go ahead and even take a complete timeout. Just step away. Maybe come back to it at a later time when you feel better about your feelings and emotions. But definitely, if something in the video triggers a memory or triggers a feeling or an emotion, please note, take care of yourself first. Take a break, take a time out, step away from your computer, go for a walk. Make sure you are okay to continue working and processing what we're talking about in terms of how trauma affects the children that we work with, okay? So just like I was mentioning earlier, in your set of tools of handouts that we provided for you that you are able to download off our website, you have this worksheet called the feelings thermometer. In the feelings thermometer, use this as a tool to kind of administer on yourself as to where you are and how you're feeling throughout the presentations and throughout discussing and listening to several of the topics that we are going to be talking about. And so if at any point you feel extremely uncomfortable with the information and or you feel as though some of the topics or some of the conversation is sparking up some memories or thoughts that make you feel just a little bit off or just not well, please note to take a time out. So the feelings thermometer, use it just as a regular thermometer. So if, for example, you feel as though you are very, very hot. We're going to use the terms hot and cold and ice cold, okay? Use very, very hot to mean very uncomfortable, extremely stressed and anxious, and need to get out of here now. So this means if you are using the term very, very hot, thinking of a thermometer, you are at this point very stressed out, very anxious. You need to take a break. You need to step away. You need to go take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe come back to it the next day. Okay? If you are hot, you're moderately uncomfortable, stressed and anxious, distracted and edgy. So this doesn't necessarily mean that you are completely anxious and just can't handle what's happening anymore. It just means that you are getting to the point where you are, very uncomfortable with what's being talked about, being discussed, or the situation or the moment. And so this might also be a sign for you to maybe take a small break, take a time out. Again, anytime you are leaning towards the hot, if we're thinking of a thermometer, and you yourself are thinking, I am very, very hot right now, or I'm hot right now, or I'm warm right now. At any of these times when you are thinking that your temperature is rising, if we're talking about a thermometer, You should consider taking a break, taking a time out, small bathroom break, go get some water, go take a little small walk, etc. The same thing for warm. Warm means you're mildly uncomfortable, slightly stressed and anxious, losing and starting to lose focus. When you are just right, when we're thinking of a thermometer, what's the just right temperature for me? So everybody has their own just right temperature. For some people like to be a little hotter, some people like to be a little cooler. For me, I would say about 75, 76 degrees is just right about it for me. So if I'm thinking of a thermometer in my head in terms of how I'm assessing myself as to whether I'm good or I'm not good with the subject at hand, I would say if my temperature was at 75, 76 degrees, that I would be comfortable, not stressed or anxious, and focused and engaged and ready to learn. If I am cooler than that, I would say I would be a little bored and losing my focus. And if I was ice cold, so meaning that my temperature gauge was not really getting engaged here. If that kind of symbolizes it, that means I'm totally bored, not focused or engaged. I'm planning to escape, meaning that I'm just done with this training. I'm out of here. I'm bored. Peace. And so make sure, as a suggestion, you can use your feelings thermometer to kind of gauge yourself, to see where you are at, and use it to know when you need to take a time out and or when you need to step away and get re-energized or get the jitters out or get whatever you need to do to feel right in the moment to be here, listening to the training. So as we begin module 1, I want to start off with a quote by Walt Whitman. There was a child went forth every day, and all that he looked upon became part of him. Read that again. There was a child went forth every day, and all that he looked upon became part of him. What does this mean? Everything that children experience becomes a part of the fiber of their being. These experiences include the very bad and confusing events we call trauma, as well as the good experience we create and share with them. We will be examining the effects of trauma by looking at the stories of children of different ages who have been in foster care. Although the details have been changed to protect the privacy of the families, these cases are based on experiences of real children and adolescents. Let's meet some of these children. Let's start with Maya. Maya is 8 months old. She was taken into care after her 17-year-old mother, Angela, brought her to the emergency room unconscious, with broken arms and bruises on her body. Maya currently is living with her mother's older sister, Jenna. 1. Maya often wakes up in the middle of the night crying hysterically. When her aunt picks her up to soothe her, Maya arches her back, pushes her hands against Jenna's shoulders, and screams even harder. When Jenna tries to make eye contact with Maya, the baby turns her head away. This little baby makes me feel rejected, Jenna says. Sometimes I feel so helpless, I just have to put her down and let her cry. We're not discussing these right now. We're not going to dive deep into what may be causing some of these things, but just listen. Just listen to their stories and try to put yourself and empathize in with their situation and what they're going through. So, like mentioned previously, just listen to the stories. Try to make connections if you can, but more importantly, just listen to the stories that you are being read or being told. All right, so now let's meet Rachel. Rachel is 17 months old. Um, 1 month ago, she was removed from her Mother Tamika's custody because of neglect and failure to protect. Since being placed in foster care, Rachel has shown little interest in food and has lost a pound. Rachel used to say mama, dada, baba, hi, and bye, but has stopped talking. Several times during the day, Rachel stands by the door or window, silently looking around as if waiting for someone. Moving on to Tommy. Tommy is 4 years old. Tommy has been in foster care for 3 weeks. He was taken into care after his father beat his mother so severely that she required hospitalization. He plays repeatedly with a toy police car and ambulance, crashing them into each other while imitating the sound of sirens wailing. When his foster father tries to change Tommy's play by having the ambulance take someone to the hospital, Tommy screams and throws a police car and ambulance. Let's move on to meet Andrea. Andrea is 9 years old. Andrea was placed in foster care when she was about a year old because of severe neglect. She's been in this, her third foster home, for about a month. This is her first placement apart from her brothers. Andrea enjoys reading with her foster father. One day, while sitting on his lap reading her favorite storybook, Andrea began to rub up and down against his crotch. Shocked and startled, Andrea's foster father pushed her off his lap, roughly telling her to get out of here. Andrea ran to her room, sobbing, "Why does everybody hate me?" and began frantically packing her suitcase. Let's meet James. James is 12 years old and has been with his foster family for about 6 months. He had been living since early childhood with his maternal grandparents, but was taken into care after his grandfather died and his grandmother's health declined. He is withdrawn and hardly speaks to his foster parents or other adults. When asked what he wants, he says, "Whatever," and shrugs his shoulder. James has been doing poorly in school and hanging out with a group of kids who dress all in black and listen to music about everything being hopeless. When James first moved in, his foster parents asked if he wanted to put up some pictures of his grandparents. In a rare show of emotion, James snapped, "No, I don't. Leave me alone," and retreated to his room for several hours. Finally, let's meet Javier. He's 15 years old. Javier has been in foster care for a little under a year. He was removed from his parents' home after he tried to intervene in one of his parents' fights, and his father beat him severely. At school, Javier frequently gets into trouble for being the class clown, and lately has been skipping class to drink or smoke pot in a nearby park. While at a party recently, Javier saw one of his friends verbally abusing a girl. When the friend pushed the girl, Javier jumped in, beating up the other boy. When his caseworker asked what had happened, Javier said, "I don't know. It was like I just went into kill mode." After listening to the stories of these children and youth, I hope that some of these stories are familiar, and if not, maybe you have heard of situations like those, and or maybe you have it brought uh, memories of your own experiences when you first got into foster care, and or during the time that you've been um, a resource parent for children who are in foster care. And so, one of the things that we are going to ask you to do at the end of this training, in the quiz that you will be doing, is providing us feedback in terms of one of the questions that you will get to answer is uh, give an example or give a situation that you have experienced in your home that has been challenging for you. These stories happen, believe it or not, more often than not. Children who are in foster care experience these daily life events that are profoundly impactful to them and daily living. It's important for us as resource parents to take that into consideration, and definitely be empathetic to them and to their stories and who they are. So, what are some of the challenges that we face as resource parents? Definitely, caring for children who have been through trauma can leave resource parents feeling confused, frustrated, unappreciated, angry, and helpless. Confused because sometimes we don't know what to do, where to go, who to ask, where to get help, etc. Sometimes we don't know enough information about the children that are placed in our homes immediately, that it leaves us in a place of just, what now? What next? What do I need to do, etc. So confused in that sense, frustrated because, just drawing off the confusion part, all of this could be frustrating. You not knowing can impact the way you plan and can impact the way you do things and how you react to certain situations that are being presented. Frustration with not knowing, frustration with what's going on and not being able to do anything about it can definitely happen more often than not. Unappreciated. Unappreciated because sometimes, you know, you have service providers and workers and people coming into your home that are maybe just demanding, 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 or what may feel like demanding, 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 and you may feel like you are only giving, 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 and giving, and that there's no give and take. And unappreciated in the sense that everything that you do is not taken into consideration. Angry, angry because sometimes there's nothing you can do about something, about an issue, about a concern. Maybe there's a waiting period, maybe there's a process, because as we know, when working as resource parents, everything is a process. Applying and waiting for certain services, it's a process. That can lead to a lot of anger, a lot of unknowns there are a lot of things that you don't know. What you know, you we as resource parents have personal biases. We may think, hey, this child doesn't need to go back home. It's unsafe for this child to go back home. But that may be a personal bias that we have. And that could lead to a lot of anger and frustration. And so we need to make sure that we're aware of these things. Make sure that we are becoming very self aware of our feelings, emotions, and our thought processes. Understanding, and if we don't understand, ask questions. And if we don't have somebody to ask those questions to, sometimes it may be just being patient. Sometimes you may not know who the social worker is. And so, therefore, you may feel you don't have somebody to ask questions to. There's always somebody to go to. Be patient. Call the county's direct line and ask to speak with a supervisor or a social worker of the day in an attempt to get information about your case. Understand that doing this job requires a lot of patience, because those people that you are trying to reach out to are also going out into the community and trying to serve and protect the children in the system. And so it may take them a while for them to reach back and call you back to give you the answers that you need. Biggest thing that I would take away, the challenge is, out of all these, becoming confused, becoming frustrated, feeling unappreciated, being angry, and sometimes feeling helpless, the challenge is to learn to be patient. Patience is extremely important because you learn to check yourself and your emotions. You can feel them, you can allow yourself to feel them, but you learn to check yourself and your emotions at the door when you need to address a certain situation. So, patience is extremely important when working with foster children and their behaviors and the things that they are coming with into your home. Patience is extremely important when working with service providers, whether it be the county social worker, whether it be RAP, whether it be TBS, whatever service provider is coming either into your home or you are going to them, such as the therapist or the psychiatrist, or regular doctor visits and or regular dental visits. Whatever it is, remember that patience is extremely important around all of this. And check yourself. Check yourself at the door. Check your emotions at the door. Sometimes reminding yourself that all of this, that being a resource parent encompasses, is not necessarily about you doing things right or wrong. It's about being there, providing that support. It takes effort. There's no right or wrong way to do things. It just takes effort. It takes you wanting to be there. And if you become confused, frustrated, feel unappreciated, angry, and helpless, chances are you're not going to want to be there. So, what is the solution to all of this? The solution is trauma informed parenting. Of course, we learn as much about trauma as we can so that we understand the situations that arise when we work with children who come from traumatic experiences. Okay? We now know a great deal about trauma and its impact on children.
including how to help children recover from trauma's effects. Once you understand why your child is behaving a certain way, you'll be better prepared to help him or her cope with the effects of trauma. Becoming a trauma informed parent would make it easier for you to 1. Communicate with your child, improve your child's behavior and attitudes, get your child the help he or she needs, reduce the risk of your own compassion fatigue or secondary traumatization, and become a more effective and satisfied resource parent. We're going to go over these individually in the next slides, so don't worry that I didn't elaborate too much on each of these drop downs, okay? So, what are some of the elements of trauma informed parenting? So, let's start with number one. Recognize the impact trauma has had on your child. The first and most basic element of trauma informed parenting is that recognizing the impact trauma has had on your child's life. When we view children's challenging behaviors through the lens of their traumatic experience, meaning their past, meaning the things that they have seen, witnessed, and lived through, that behavior begins to make more sense. When resource parents, caseworkers, and other members of the child's team share this lens, they can develop effective strategies together. Why? Because we're understanding where all of this is coming from. Why the child is behaving the way and reacting the way the child is. All and many a time we find that the child is acting and reacting and being him or her because of their lived experiences, what life has been like for them, and what strategies and what things they had to put in place to survive. The essential elements of trauma informed parenting. Number two, help your child feel safe. Safety is critical for children who have experienced trauma. Many have not consistently felt safe or protected in their own homes. A child who has experienced trauma may be physically safe and still not feel psychologically safe. As a resource parent, you can establish an environment that is physically safe and work with your child to learn what it will take to create psychological safety. Not only are you going to be working with your child, but also working as a team with the service providers and the therapist, and if there is RAP involved and or TBS involved. Work with your team to ensure that the child not only feels physically safe, but psychologically safe. The essential elements of trauma informed parenting. Number three, help your child to understand and manage overwhelming emotions. Trauma can result in such intense fear, anger, shame, and helplessness that the child feels overwhelmed. For children who are plagued with memories, images, and thoughts of past trauma, even neutral experiences may unleash a flood of overwhelming emotions and panic. In addition, trauma can derail development so that children fail to learn how to identify, express, or manage their emotional states. For example, babies learn to regulate and tolerate their shifting feelings by interacting with caring adults. Older children who did not develop these skills during infancy may seem more like babies emotionally. By providing calm, consistent, and loving care, you can set an example for your children and teach them how to define, express, and manage their emotions. So, again, help your child to understand and manage overwhelming emotions. That cannot be better stated, and it cannot be stated enough as to how important that is. Some children that we work with struggle identifying their emotions, sometimes don't even know how to put it into words as to how they feel or what they're feeling. So it's important. It's important that if we can identify it, that we pass that information along to the children that we are working with. Okay? And don't, one thing and one word of advice is don't try to teach when the child is going through crisis. At this point, if the child is going through crisis, it will be useless to try to teach in that moment. Wait until the crisis is done to help teach um, and identify these emotions at that time. But in the time of crisis, your job and your duty, more than anything, is to support. Support, support, support in any way that you can. And if supporting means stepping away and giving the child some space in a place that is safe and that the child is not going to hurt himself or someone else, then that is what you do. The essential elements of trauma-informed parenting. Number 4, help your child to understand and modify problem behaviors. Overwhelming emotions can have a very negative impact on children's behavior, particularly if they cannot make the connections between feelings and behaviors. Because trauma can derail development, children who have experienced trauma may display problem behaviors more typical of younger children. For example, during the school age years, children learn how to think before they act. Adolescents who never learn this skill may be especially impulsive and apt to get into trouble. As a trauma-informed parent, you can help your children to understand the links between their thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and to take control of their behavioral responses. The essential elements of trauma-informed parenting. Number 5, respect and support positive, stable, and enduring relationships in the life of your child. Children learn who they are and what the world is like through the connections they make, including relationships with other people. These connections help children define themselves and their place in the world. Positive, stable relationships play a vital role in helping children heal from trauma. Children who have been abused or neglected often have insecure attachments with other people. Nevertheless, they may cling to these attachments, which are disrupted or even destroyed when they come into care. As a trauma-informed resource parent, you can help your child to hold on to what was good about these connections, reshape them, make new meaning from them, and build new, healthier relationships between yourself and your child and others as well. Your responsibility then becomes to model these behaviors for the children, model these relationship building skills for them. The essential elements of trauma-informed parenting. Number 6, help your child develop a strength-based understanding of his or her life story. In order to heal from trauma, children need to develop a strong sense of self, to put their trauma histories in perspective, and to recognize that they are worthwhile and valued individuals. Unfortunately, many children who have experienced trauma live by an unwritten rule of don't tell anyone anything. They may believe that what happened to them is somehow their fault because they are bad or damaged or did something wrong. You can help your child or children to overcome these beliefs by being a safer listener when they share, working with them to build bridges across the disruptions in their lives, and helping them to develop a strength-based understanding of their life stories. The essential elements of trauma informed parenting. Number 7, be an advocate for your child. Trauma can affect so many aspects of a child's life that it takes a team of people and agencies to facilitate recovery. As the person who is most intimately and consistently connected with the child, you are a critical part of this team and can help ensure that efforts are coordinated. As a trauma informed resource parent, you may be in a position to help others view your child's through a trauma lens, meaning that as a resource parent, being trained and informed on what trauma is and how it impacts the life of kids, you, more than anybody, because of the amount of time that you spend with the kids and because they are primarily in your care, you know more than anybody what these children are capable of doing, how they respond to crisis, how they respond to joyful events, good events, so on and so forth. You know about them more than anybody else. Therefore, you are the key stakeholder in how a lot of agencies, a lot of service providers, how social workers will interact and work with these children to help support their stability in your home. The essential elements of trauma informed parenting. Number 8, promote and support trauma focused assessment and treatment for your child. What does this mean? Children who have experienced trauma often need specialized assessment and treatment in order to heal. There are many treatments available whose effectiveness has been established. As resource parents, we are in a unique position to advocate for trauma informed psychological assessment and treatment offered by experienced child trauma professionals. For the most part, in Fresno County, the service providers that are serving your children are informed, or trauma informed, and trauma professionals. They understand the impact of trauma on the development of children. The therapist, the psychologist, the psychiatrist, the RAP service providers, the clinicians on the RAP team, TBS service providers, etc. The people that are on your team and service providers will usually understand what this means. Other people working with your child, for example, attorneys, for example, teachers, administrators, other people in the community are more than likely going to need help and support, possibly from you or the service providers, in explaining to them what trauma has done in terms of the development of the children that you are working with. And so when you notice that and when you recognize that, please provide support. Take the initiative to provide support and help educate these professionals in the best way that you can. However, remember that if you come across a service provider that is not trauma informed, take it upon yourself to advocate on the child's behalf. The essential elements of trauma informed parenting. Number 9, take care of yourself. Taking good care of ourselves is one of the most important skills we can develop as caregivers. In taking care of ourselves, we help our children learn how to take good care of themselves as well. So one of the things, just as mentioned, if we are taking care of ourselves, remember that everything that you are doing, the children are observing you do. And so if your response to your own crisis is to panic, children's response to their crisis is going to continue to panic. Why? Because they're observing that this is something that is okay, one, or is normal to happen. But if your response to your own uh, crisis is to take a break, to step away, to take deep breaths, then you are modeling and helping the child understand and giving the child coping mechanisms as to what the child can do when they are going through crisis themselves. Important to note, take care of yourself. Take care of yourself. Why? Because if you do not take care of yourself, you are going to incapacitate yourself and overwork yourself to the point of burnout. And you will be useless and incapable of working with children who are going through crisis. That is not to say that you will be useless completely, so please don't take that in a negative connotation. Just to say that everything and your ability to cope with the situation is going to be impacted drastically. These essential elements of trauma-informed parenting that we just talked about: one, recognize the impact trauma has had on your child; two, help your child to feel safe; three, help your child to understand and manage overwhelming emotions; four, help your child to understand and modify problem behaviors; five, respect and support positive, stable, and enduring relationships in the life of your child; six, help your child to develop a strength-based understanding of his or her life story; seven, be an advocate for your child; eight, promote and support trauma-focused assessment and treatment for your child; and nine, take care of yourself. These essential elements make up the backbone of this workshop. Over the course of the next 7 modules, we'll work together to gain the knowledge and skills to put each of these elements to work. Remember, there's a total of 8 modules, and this is module 1. The next 7 will work together to gain the knowledge and skills to put each of these elements to work. The essential elements that we just went over are the important do's, the things to do when working with children who have been affected by trauma. But there are also a few don'ts, and we're going to talk about these don'ts in the myths to avoid. Actually, some of these myths get in the way of our trauma-informed parenting and make our lives even more stressful. Let's take a look at them. So number 1, my love should be enough to erase the effects of everything bad that happened before. It's impossible to be the perfect parent, right? If we fall into the trap of believing that we have to be perfect parents, it may keep us from being the good enough parents our children need. Number 2, my child should be grateful and love me as much as I love him or her. Just as it's important to accept your own limitations, it's important to accept your child's limitations. Your child may appreciate you and let you know, or not. But the fact that the child doesn't express appreciation or love does not mean that you're not having an impact. Number 3, my child shouldn't love or feel loyal to an abusive parent. Even children who have suffered extreme neglect or abuse at the hands of their families will feel deeply connected and attached to them. Number 4, it's better to just move on, forget, and not talk about past painful experiences. We may feel that this is the best way to get over traumatic experiences, to not think about them or talk about them at all, and to just move on. This may have worked even for us in our own lives, but many children can't forget. They need our help to talk about and make sense of their traumatic experiences in order to keep the experiences from having negative reverberations in all aspects of their lives. We're going to move on to our closing slides here. And so I'm going to ask you to, in the documents that you downloaded from the website, look for a page titled My Child Worksheet, Module 1, Introductions. On that page, it should say what I know about my child's life before coming into my home. And question number 2 on there should say what I'd like to know. On this worksheet, and for your quiz after this training, you will need to answer those questions. You can choose to write them down on the worksheet, or you can choose to write them down in the quiz that you will take after this training. The point of this workshop is to give you skills that you can use in the real world. The My Child Worksheet is a tool to help you apply the lessons you learn over the next few sessions to an actual child from your own life. Imagine a real child sitting in the chair beside you. This child could be a child currently in your home, a child who was once in your home, or a child you know from church, your extended family, or your neighborhood. The reason those latter 3 are in there is just in case you are a first-time resource parent and have not yet had a placement in your home. Using the worksheet, fill in the basic information about the child, his or her fictitious name, age, and gender. Note down anything you know about the child's life before coming into your home. Where did he or she live before? Was it with birth family? Was it in another family? Was it in another foster home? Was it a group home? Why was he or she removed and placed in your home? Include whatever you know about the child's life prior to placement. Why is this child in foster care? Remember, when you are answering these questions in the quiz, please indicate a fictitious name if you do indicate a name. This is so in order to protect the child's identity and confidentiality. Question number 2, is there anything about this child that you would like to understand better? For example, a behavior that seems confusing, a reaction that you can't make sense of. Put it all down. Anything that comes up, anything that you'd like to understand better, write it down. Again, this is also going to be on your quiz. Keep your child in mind throughout the next sessions that we are going to have. At different points, you'll have the opportunity to take a fresh look at your child's behaviors, feelings, attitudes, and relationships from a trauma-informed perspective. In the end, becoming a trauma-informed parent should not only give you new insights into your child's behavior and responses, but also improve your experience as you care for the children who've been through traumatic experiences. To finish up, as we noted earlier, learning to see your child through a trauma lens can bring up some intense feelings and reactions. Before we break, or before we end this session today, let's try a simple relaxation technique that can help you and your child to calm down when feeling a little bit overwhelmed. Let's begin by exhaling completely, and then take a deep breath in and count to 4. Hold this breath for 4 seconds. Exhale completely to a count of 4. Wait 4 seconds. Then inhale again, slowly to a count of 4. Repeat. Thank you for joining us today. Please do not forget to take your quiz online. The link to the quiz should be in the same space where you access this video. Remember to also download all the documentation that is provided as support, as it is specifically included to help as a go-to place to find resources and information. Thanks again. Have a good day.